Welcome everyone, it's time for a game breakdown. In this video, I want to check out Dark Souls Remastered. On the surface, it appears to have everything I want in a medieval fantasy adventure game, and on that surface, it delivers. What's interesting is how it also comes through in areas I didn't even expect. However, the game makes me work for it, and more than once I had to take breaks just to re-strategize. Yes, I'd say it's difficult, but don't just take my word for it. Let's check it out. Alright, here we are, character creation. It's not really important. This is what's important. And there we go. Now, I haven't mentioned the story, and that's because it's told in a very interesting way. The first cutscene sets the stage for everything that's happened up to the start of the game. The reason why it's interesting is because aside from that, the bulk of the story is delivered through NPC conversations and numerous item descriptions. This is an unusual form of storytelling in games, as far as I know, and I quite enjoy it. There is a surprisingly deep narrative about my chosen undead, who escapes imprisonment and restores some sort of order back to the land that was put in this state of despair by its most influential leaders. It's a pretty decent underdog tale, but not essential to the casual player. Most people who come into the game fresh and end up quitting early on may never experience the latter half of the story. That's one of the reasons why I made it my mission to take down every boss the game has to offer, because the same is true with them as well. So, once I vanquish the tutorial boss, I get politely taken to the Firelink Shrine. This is the game's central hub. It earns that title because there's a ton to do here and a lot I have access to. Various NPCs can stop by if I save or encounter them out in the world, and some of them will trade goods here. The real magic of this location is the freedom. For example, 3 paths branch off from here which lead to further areas that all eventually need to be explored and their bosses defeated. However, the game doesn't limit me on which path to take, so long as I chose the master key at the start. Sure, there is a way it softly leads me by making the enemies properly difficult for my beginning level. And there are 3 main areas inaccessible until I acquire the Lordvessil later on, but that doesn't mean there aren't reasons for going down the unbeaten paths. What really impresses me though is when I think about the map in general, because all these branches I mentioned meet up at various points which connect the map together into a seamless world. This alone would be neat, but it's taken to another level when you realize there is no in-game map. You, the player, are responsible for remembering all the shortcuts and navigations to the other areas. It can totally be overwhelming at first, so it is a good idea to try the upper path first. It leads to a big red dragon and lots of undead. The goal at this point is to acquire the Lordvessil, and for that I must reach Anor Londo, and to do that I have to ring 2 giant bells. The first one is guarded by these menacing gargoyles who pose a pretty serious challenge for the early game. After that, I have to make my way down to Blighttown, which requires the master key for the easy route under Firelink Shrine, which I always take. After getting to the bottom of this disgusting filth pile, I make my way towards the second bell, which is guarded by a rather fierce spider queen. Quelaag shoots freaking lava and has a flaming sword. But what's a boss without a challenge? Now that she's taken care of, I ring the second bell, which opens the gate to Sen's fortress. While leaving Blighttown is not easy, I would say the difficulty of Sen's fortress is on another level. It's basically this huge castle filled with difficult enemies and Indiana Jones style traps. It's even got huge rolling boulders. Sen's fortress is a difficult trek, but I still love the setting. Perched on top of the castle is another boss who can be tough to tackle alone. Thankfully, help isn't very difficult to find. Some bosses have NPCs available to summon outside their rooms, but it might require meeting or saving that NPC first. There is always the option of finding someone online too, although before attempting any of that, it is essential for me to make sure that I'm human first. The way I accomplish this is by sacrificing a precious humanity to any bonfire. Much like souls, my collected humanity gets dropped upon death, and I only have one life to retrieve it, otherwise it's all gone forever. This can be very frustrating, but to me it is part of the experience and the challenge, so bring it on. Being human not only allows me to summon others, but also allows others to invade me, either online or not. This last part depends on the area, however, for the non-player characters will only appear in specific locations, and they can drop some very unique equipment. I'm sure this is all very interesting, however it can actually be helpful for those particularly pesky encounters. After kind of breaking the Iron Golem match, some delightful new friends come along to take me all the way up to the magical Anor Londo. Only one fight remains until I get the Lordvessil, but the path there is treacherous, especially the bit on the outside of the castle with those archers. The boss fight itself is pretty insane. It's 2-on-1 with the second phase that has either Ornstein or Smough absorb the other's power and become gigantic. Even with Solaire's help, the task was daunting. Granted, I might have been underleveled and using a weapon that needed upgrading, but I'll discuss that after I finally get the Lordvessil.
The Lordvessil to thee.
Great, now that I have the Lordvessil, I can warp between specific bonfires, which is immensely useful for the rest of the game. With this milestone secured, I think it's a good time to discuss combat, because that is where the real challenge lies. Upon killing an enemy in the game, they will drop souls, hence the name Dark Souls. These souls are used for things like leveling up, and based on what stats I increase, different weapons and abilities will become available for my use. I won't go into it much, but know that these are important for making a powerful build in the game. It can be useful to know what to go for beforehand, seeing as there are many options for different builds. Spells, miracles, bows, axes, spears, or swords, all with different movesets. Then you add in the rhythmic dodges, the parries, and all of a sudden the game has a pretty diverse system. It takes time to learn, just like anything else, but there is a high level of satisfaction that comes from it. For anyone curious, I'm running a Dex and Faith build, which allows me to be more mobile. I personally prefer this style over the more poise-heavy, tank-like builds, but honestly those are really fun too. Add in the Shadows set that makes me look like a ninja, and the Dark Woodgrain ring for those spectacular flips to create the full effect. Well, that and the Lightning Spear, of course. I obtained this by joining the Sunlight Covenant, which is just one of many that I came across throughout my playthrough. In fact, Gwendolyn, the leader of the Darkmoon Covenant, can become an interesting optional boss fight with decent rewards. Just don't kill his sister, or else Anor Londo will end up like this. There are also boss weapons that I can have made by combining a similar type of weapon with the corresponding boss soul. Not only do they look the part, but many of them are viable endgame choices. The only downside is that in order to upgrade these heavy hitters, I need to find and murder these cute little crystal bugs that drop the required material. This game also contains some intimidating Titanite demons, which possess their own unique upgrade pieces for some of the more impressive heavy weapons. Acquiring all these components can be time-consuming and a bit of a chore to complete. That is, until I unlock actual methods to farm everything I require in the later game. Even though upgrading and repairing my gear is critical to surviving this shit, so is reinforcing my Estus Flask. Simply giving the proper item to any firekeeper will do the trick. However, I also tend to kindle certain bonfires with a few humanity, which allows me to have even more flasks available when I rest at those bonfires. What reinforcing the flask does is give me an increased amount of available health to draw from when I need it. And yeah, I need it a lot. Can you really blame me though when the game manages to find ways to complicate things? Like hacking off every tail I see in the hopes that I'll obtain a rare weapon. Actually, I'm on board. That's pretty cool. The last thing to mention in terms of combat are the embers I found throughout the different areas. A couple of these are vital just to max out the standard level of a weapon to say plus 15, but that's not all I can do. Finding different embers and taking them to the proper smith who can work them will result in a new variety of weapon types.
Oh, really?
This is how you get access to the lightning, fire, magic, and also divine weapons. These can be upgraded further or even enhanced once more embers are collected to deal better damage. I'd say these embers are definitely worth picking up. They really helped keep me ahead of the enemies in the later areas. That's all I've got for now on combat, but don't worry, there's still plenty of fighting left to do. Now that I have the Lordvessil, I get to talk to this thing.
Ah, hello. Was it you who rang the bell of awakening?
He jabbers on and practically begs me to help him link the fire, which is a choice I have to make at the end of the game, but we're not there yet. So, my new friend Frampt swallows me up and transports me to the Firelink altar. Once I place the Lordvessil on said altar, 3 previously closed off paths are then opened to me. The goal of the game now is to get through this massive door and take down the final boss. However, I need to fill the Lordvessil with 4 Lord Souls to do that, 3 of which are located far inside these newly unlocked areas. So, the quest continues on, and I decide to hunt down Gravelord Nito first. In order to reach Nito, I have to initially run through the catacombs, which are dingy and packed with enemies. That's nothing though compared with the Tomb of the Giants, which is so black the monsters literally vanish into darkness right in front of my eyes. Even though parts of both of these areas made me want to pull my hair out, just like with Sen's Fortress, the setting is incredible. Nito is hiding in this massive underground chamber, and his fight was very difficult for me. That was until I remembered that divine weapons will permanently kill his respawning minions. After that, it was much more manageable. Now that the god of death is dead, I need to pay another visit to Anor Londo in order to reach the Duke's archives. Seith the Scaleless can be found in a room within the archives, but the first encounter is impossible to win. This bastard uses some special crystal that makes him invincible. So after Seith thrashes me, he then proceeds to throw me in a prison cell. Joke's on him though, because I break out and manage to work my way through the gorgeous crystal cave. It really makes the multiple runs to the boss room bearable when I get to look at this. The second encounter with Seith is different because this time around I get to break his fancy crystal, which renders him vulnerable for the whole fight. After I defeat him and obtain my second Lord Soul, I decide to move on to the Bed of Chaos, which is found in Lost Izalith. In order to reach it though, I first need to make my way through the Demon Ruins, just past Quelaag's boss chamber. However, they're flooded with lava. Killing this abomination drains the lava and makes the area accessible. Then, after killing a giant demonic centipede and getting a ring that'll let me walk on lava, I'm ready for Lost Izalith. I see this place as another great example of the game creating a sensational sense of fantasy. Although I'm afraid I can't say the same for the boss fight, even though it starts out looking promising. The Bed of Chaos is notorious for being an awful boss, and I'd agree. I mean, you kill the thing in 3 hits. Its difficulty revolves around a combination of luck and platforming, which are not the high points of this game. So I was shocked to have killed this headache on the first go. I guess in this case, luck was a high point. Anyway, now that I have obtained 3 Lord Souls, only 1 remains, and it's under Firelink Shrine. The new Londo ruins are filled with agitated ghosts who are really bothersome. After I open a massive door and let all the floodwater out, the lower reaches of the area become available. This grants me access to the boss fight. However, in order to actually start it, I need a special ring. A ring I acquire in the Dark Root Garden from a giant wolf with a sword in its mouth named Seith. With this ring, I can survive the epic drop down to the 4 kings, who reside in the Abyss. I truly enjoyed this fight. The sheer spectacle always gets me excited, and the sense of accomplishment I gain from victory feels very rewarding. Now that I have all the Lord Souls I need, let's go open that door. With that done, all that's left is to fight the final boss. Or that's what I would say, if not for DLC. The downloadable content for Dark Souls is accessed after killing a huge Hydra, and then freeing an NPC from a giant crystal monster. After getting sucked in, it wastes no time throwing me into a boss battle. I quite enjoyed my time with this part of the game. It has a few truly dense and scenic sections. Plus, some of the most challenging boss fights the game has to offer. Seriously, this kicks it up a notch. The DLC also better furthers the story for anyone who follows along with it. And the final battle really requires some patience because Manus does a massive amount of damage. With that adventure out of the way, I think it's time to actually take down the final boss. Gwyn is just hanging out with the First Flame, and he's not happy. Normally, this guy creates excessive amounts of stress for me, Thankfully though, a whole game's worth of parrying practice makes this fight a cakewalk. After defeating the Lord of Cinder, I go ahead and choose to link the fire. Now that's fantastic. However, there is a second ending, which in my opinion is quite difficult to perform. This requires me to make it all the way down to the 4 kings and defeat them before ever even talking to Frampt in Firelink Shrine. Instead, I meet his brother Karth down in the abyss and agree to help him let the fire fade into an age of darkness, which will give me this ending.
My lord, bless thy safe return. Let Karth and Frampt serve your highness. We are here to serve your highness. Let true dark be cast upon the world.
So there we are, that is the end of Dark Souls, but there's still more I want to mention. Sadly, the game will automatically kick me into New Game Plus immediately after defeating Gwyn, so it's good that I explored everything else I wanted to beforehand. The game has quite a few optional areas that I find intriguing, which really give more depth and flavor to the experience for those curious enough to discover them. Like this painting in Anor Londo, which leads to an entire area based off one of the first level designs for the game. It even has a unique boss who doesn't initiate the fight when entering her room. In fact, I don't even have to fight her at all. I can simply walk past and leave. Or how about the return trip to the Undead Asylum, which is now filled with Black Knights. There's even an extra demon lying under the floor where I had my first boss fight. Also, I can't forget the depths. It's another squalid filth pit that's riddled with petrifying basilisks, but at the end is a spectacular boss fight. Lastly is not just my favorite optional area in the game, but probably my favorite period. I remember discovering this location myself the first time I played Dark Souls, and wow! I'm a sucker for beautifully vast open areas, and that is precisely what I found with Ash Lake. Those are just the optional areas. The DLC even contains a rather majestic optional boss that was a real challenge. And I think it's great that the game has all these extra things to do. It helps keep me playing. Unfortunately though, all good things must eventually come to an end. So I'll try to encapsulate all my thoughts and feelings on the Dark Souls experience. This game asks a lot of the player. It forced me to learn and grow used to not only its combat systems, and everything involved with boosting my success, but also its fantastic level design, which, if I think about it right now, having just completed the game, I can remember every shortcut and how to navigate just about anywhere. I only found a few hidden doors though, so there's still secrets I'm sure I'll never discover. This required focus and expected determination can be a rather large barrier to entry for many. However, I was able to find satisfaction in the challenge, and my determination stemmed from my successes. Don't get me wrong, I legitimately despised parts of this game, but the experience and excitement I felt after finally ending a pesky boss just made each milestone feel like a serious accomplishment. Speaking of which, that's probably an award I'd give Dark Souls. A serious accomplishment. Along with my seal of approval, of course. Thanks for sticking through this adventure with me, everyone. I'll be sure to have another one ready to go in the future. Until then, I'll see you next time.